Welcome to the Juice Box with Juice Springsteen, covering the week that was in professional wrestling. And hello, everybody, to this very special edition of the Juice Box. Of course, I am Juice Springsteen, but my guest at this time, a very special guest. He is a world-traveled independent pro wrestler who also, works in AAA in Mexico. He's the promoter of WrestleRex in Pittsburgh, here to discuss the Bruno Forever Independent Wrestling Show this Saturday in Pittsburgh, Mexico's #1 babyface, Dallas-based, but forever from Pittsburgh, the one and only Sam Adonis. Welcome to the Juice Box. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing great, man. Thank you for having me. I really only agreed to do this because you are a Pittsburgh boy, so we got to stick together somehow.
Hell yeah.
I've been inundated for the last 2 years. It's just there's so many wrestling podcasts now, and I get so many offers all the time that really the only way to stay fair to any of them is tell most of them no. Because literally any night of the week I could do a podcast with somebody, and it's just, I'm all for helping people out and try to do what I can to get somebody some viewers or whatever. But I mean, it seems like every single show has 5 or 6 people that want you on a podcast. Now, it's a lot. It's time consuming. So you're a Pittsburgh guy. We got a Pittsburgh show coming up. I'm happy to help.
Absolutely. And I really appreciate you sitting down and taking your time out of your day to do this. I, just talked to you before we even hit record. You were just on the phone with the very special guest that's going to be there this weekend, Stan the Lariat Hansen. It's crazy that it's just so casual for you to talk to him, but you seem to be growing a relationship with him.
It's one of those things that actually it worked out perfectly. I actually was able to get on his good side, if you will. And this all came together due to some of my connections with the Cauliflower Alley Club in Las Vegas, the organization that raises money for old wrestlers. But, I made some good connections there. And I also worked for All Japan Pro Wrestling. So the first time I was able to talk to Stan, I kind of, played my cards in a way that I could explain to him who I was and throwing in there, hey, yeah, I actually worked for All Japan. So that kind of opened up his eyes a little bit. We had a bunch of mutual friends. And, anytime you can find common ground with somebody, especially a legend in wrestling, and, be able to talk about something more than just a booking or advice, it kind of opens the door. So, I would say we're growing a friendship. A guy like that has a million more important friends than I am. But at the same time, I'm really enjoying talking to him. And this weekend, I get to be his personal chauffeur, and really looking forward to the weekend.
That's badass, man. And yeah, this weekend's going to be special. When I first even saw the flyer for it, I was really it piqued my interest as a tribute to studio wrestling. And I know Bruno and just like the history of Pittsburgh goes so far back with pro wrestling. So it's really cool to see an event kind of turn back the clock, if you will, to celebrate the old while celebrating the new and current of independent pro wrestling. So for you, just in general, before we kind of touch on the event, when were you first introduced to pro wrestling at all? I know that your dad was a promoter, and you're a promoter now yourself. So where did it all start for Sam Adonis?
So I don't really think there was ever a moment where it began. I was just kind of like, bored into it. My dad was a wrestling fan dating back to the 1960s. He used to go to wrestling shows with his grandfather and was the biggest Bruno Sammartino fan you can imagine. So, naturally, when he had his kids, my older brother, Corey Graves, he was born in '84, which was right around the time, Hulkamania started and all the toys came out and all the magazines were everywhere. So, that was their common ground when my brother was a baby and he's 5 years older than me. So by the time I was literally born into a world where we had wrestling videos and magazines and stories and tapes and everything you could imagine in between. So it was kind of like, in a weird way, I don't want to call it my birthright because there's really no value in it. But at the same time, it was like I was born a part of the wrestling business. So in our house, a lot of people, their dad talks about, going to football games or, their childhood memories. My dad's childhood memories involved Bruno Sammartino. So we kind of had a little bit of a lore in our household about, Bruno being the man. And, even at a very young age, when we started finding videos of Bruno matches and, tape trading, whatnot, I might have been 3 or 4 years old, and you're talking 93, 94, when, the WWF New Generation was on TV. I was
Yeah.
a 3-year-old watching videos of old Madison Square Garden, watching videos of All Japan from 1974, so I've had a very, very unique introduction and outlook on wrestling since I was a kid. But again, there was never that point where like, oh, I like this. It was just always right around me, and I loved everything about it.
That's really unique, as you said, like, because to me, my dad watched wrestling, so I just kind of saw it and was like, oh, this is something, and that's how it was. But for you, it's like there was never a world where wrestling wasn't a part of it, which is awesome to hear.
Exactly. And I mean, it goes even deeper than that, because we had the magazines throughout the 90s. And I remember seeing ECW magazine, ECW clips. And then, it's 7 years old. My dad comes home one day and surprises us with ECW tickets because they're coming to Pittsburgh.
Wow.
And I was by far the youngest kid in that arena because, our family didn't look at it as, oh, this is adult oriented wrestling. It was,
right.
It's wrestling. We do this. This is our thing, so there was never, I remember sitting up at midnight on a Saturday watching it, and I could watch Beulah McGillicuddy and Francine cat fighting, and my mother was never going to tell me turn that garbage off, And to extend on that, what's even funnier is our first ECW show is where I got my first tape of Japanese deathmatch wrestling. So
Wow.
when I was 11 years old in health class, I did a paper on what I wanted to be when I grow up, and believe it or not, I wrote it about wanting to do death matches in Japan. It was real and hardcore. And I remember the teacher calling home that day and saying, hey, this isn't normal for an 11-year-old to want to go, fight with thumbtacks and barbed wire in Japan. You sure this is healthy? And my parents said, it's wrestling. Don't worry about
it. That's so incredible how nonchalant, because that's exactly how I assumed they were going to respond was, oh, what are you talking about? It is normal to him.
And the thing is, it tied into every aspect of my life. Like, they used to, if I did something wrong, I would get grounded. But, a lot of times if I was grounded, that didn't do anything. That didn't really fix the problem. But when they wanted to take wrestling away from me, they knew they'd get it fixed. So that was always the main punishment. No wrestling for a month. Well, can I go hang out and play down the street with my friends? Yeah, go ahead. Can I go ride my bike at the park? Yeah, go for it. Can I watch wrestling? Nope. And that, okay, you're talking serious now. And that really, really, shaped me in my behavior. And what's funny is a lot of people don't realize it, but I was a very fat, unathletic kid. And I wasn't good at any sports. I had no interest in anything other than wrestling. And, they were, my whole family and my whole circle was kind of concerned about my weight. And they all said, there was never, ever, ever a day I wanted to be a pro wrestler. I always knew I was going to be a pro wrestler. Wasn't even just like it. There was never like, oh, well, how? It was just like, oh yeah, it'll be fine. One day I'm gonna be a world-class wrestler. It's okay. I didn't waste my time with girlfriends and parties in high school. I was just like, oh, there'd be plenty of time with that when I'm an international travel wrestler. And in a weird way, I almost feel like that onset, you talk about that positive thought and dream it, do it style behavior, and I feel like I kind of have some firsthand insight on that because I really was one of those, don't want something, will something, and it makes a difference.
That's really incredible, dude. Like the fact that you are living your dream currently, and just to say that you wanted to do it, even if you never knew if it was possible or not, you just knew you wanted to do it, and you're doing it right now, man.
Well, what's really crazy is how in depth, because again, going back to my tape trading and whatnot, there wasn't too many 10-year-olds in the United States in 2000 that knew anything about Japanese professional wrestling, let alone obsessing over Hayabusa and Ultimo Dragon, or even knowing what Arena Mexico was. In a way, like, we always talk about living your dreams. My dream now is to, make as much money as possible. But if you look back as far as like what 10-year-old Sam wanted to do, I want to wrestle in Arena Mexico. I would love to wrestle Ultimo Dragon. And these things that they were so specific and they actually have all come true. So it kind of gives me an upper hand on knowing how to manage my belief system, get what I want out of life, because I've already attained these things that are so difficult to obtain that, now everything else seems easy. It's not a matter of how, it's a when.
Exactly, and that it's all about a mindset of like, well, sure, it is difficult, but you knew that if you applied certain things and did things a certain way, you absolutely could achieve it. And again, you're living proof of that as we speak. So
Exactly.
that's
It's
wonderful,
wild.
man.
It's been a hell of a ride, but I'm very, very blessed and happy.
Absolutely. So, this show coming up this weekend, I'm really looking forward to it. I'm going to be there. And I just saw WrestleRex arguably for the first time. I didn't actually go to those shows at the Rex Theater, but I'd heard about them, never got a chance to go. And I got to go this, was it last month, I believe, at City Winery. And it was an unbelievable experience and just production of everything. Cause I had been to City Winery. It's just comedy shows, what have you. But to see them put a ring in the middle of that floor and to just have it be all bells and whistles and everybody's running around doing this and that, and it came off incredible to me, just casual bystander standing watching the show. Tell me a little bit about how WrestleRex has been something of I mean, maybe a passion project for you as promoter of the show.
So WrestleRex was kind of born on accident. It started because Penta and Phoenix were the hottest act in the country at the time, and I was seeing them 3 or 4 times a month across the country. And I knew they had never been to Pittsburgh, and I was doing security in Pittsburgh at the Rex Theater. And we'd always joked about like, "Hey, let's do a show here. Let's make it happen." And we joked about this for probably 2 or 3 years until finally, all the pieces fell into place. I'm like, and if I brought them to Pittsburgh, downtown on a Thursday, it could probably be a pretty big thing. So the first one, I mean, we all knew it was something special, and it kind of like, whoa, this is definitely different than we see elsewhere. But a lot of the development has been born out of my dislike of modern independent wrestling. I think that the things I like about wrestling, the glitz, the glamour, the emotion, I think a lot of times nobody's leaning into any of those aspects on independent wrestling. I think people are so used to just saying, yeah, well, there's a ring and there's guys doing moves. So it's not WWE, but this is as good as it's going to get. And I think, people have made independent wrestling, we've normalized low quality. A lot of times, you're in a gymnasium with no ambience, no vibe, and you don't realize that it's hard for fans to give their emotion and be emotionally invested if there's no, packaging around it to make it look,
Right.
what do you call it?
Aesthetically
Just
pleasing.
aesthetically pleasing. You need to come in and, with WrestleRex, we play with the music. I have a playlist that I want to be playing while people come in. You're planting seeds the whole time, getting people drunk and saying, man, what is this? Not only that, I don't, to be fair, there's only about 5 local wrestlers on their shows. I like to bring in guys. And honestly, what the hardest part for WrestleRex is to get the crowd needed to actually, break even, because I'm bringing in guys that are premium quality guys and that come at a price, but they might not be recognized or worldwide known enough to sell enough tickets to justify their price.
Right.
Uh, I myself am one of these talents. I'm one of the guys that all over the world, I know I'm a top level indie guy that's going to sell you 100 tickets, but I know that when your fans leave, they're going to talk about me. So
Right.
my whole career has been based on promoters that are willing to take that chance. And that's kind of what we do. We bring in guys that you might not have heard of, but when you leave, you're going to say, damn, how have I not heard of that guy? And, hopefully I think that's kind of what's got us in the right direction. That I think, people know just because it's small, it's only a venue of 300 people doesn't mean it's not high quality professional wrestling. I think the indies have kind of normalized, small local wrestling means bad wrestling. And I think this
Yeah.
is an opportunity for me to break that stigma.
Absolutely, and I was gonna say that's a negative connotation that people have, unfortunately, towards independent wrestling, and if you don't have that emotion, like you said, it's so much harder to pull that fan or fans or the whole damn arena to come back to another show. You might only have a one-off if they don't feel anything.
And you also have to look at, wrestlers are very guilty of it too. Wrestlers wrestle for wrestling fans. And a lot of times wrestling fans, most American towns and cities are kind of numb to independent wrestling because they've been burnt out. If you think about how many
Yeah.
people have went to one independent show, every city, there might be 10,000 people that went to one indie wrestling show. But when the wrestlers are wrestling for the internet or for their own search, Dave Meltzer style fans, those casual fans that like, yay, boo, hero, villain wrestling, are going to say, that was all right, but they're not going to need to come back. You need to
Right.
find the lowest. You need to find the lowest common denominator and put together a show that's for everybody instead of just the diehard wrestling fans. And I think that's what we were very good at being able to figure out.
And that's definitely something I've heard in the past of like wrestling should be a buffet. You know, not everything's going to be for everybody, but there should be something for everybody, at least one thing to still hook them in, and it's an attraction for the next event. And I think you've done that with WrestleRex, and especially with this Bruno Forever show is a very unique type of show with the talent you've booked, plus some of the legends that are coming in. You also have Bill Apter going to be there. It's a hodgepodge, really, of just classic, new, and all packaged into one.
I think what I'm really most excited about this show is because it's kind of the first wrestling show that I've been a part of. It's almost skewed to an elder demographic. This basically is for your 35 to 50-year-old. And in order, again, it's a lot deeper than just picking a number. You got to consider
Right.
These are the people that have the money, that have the kids, that want to bring the family. So you can't just make it to a 35 to 50-year-old. So again,
Right.
when constructing a show like this, you have to do the same. You follow the same principles, have something for everyone. But we know what's bringing the fans to the dance this time. And me as a performer, I very much like it because I am a student of the game. I'm to this
Yes.
day. I mean, there's wrestling on my TV behind you right now that I will watch the oldest, most obscure wrestling, and I can find something in a Johnny Valentine match from 1962 that nobody on the show would even think of because I'm that in depth with it.
I love
I
it.
I think that's something that'll be fun about this event is kind of telling the guys, hey guys, this is not, don't bring that, hey, let's go viral game. I want you to go out there and, give these people, let's pretend for a second it's 1974 and this is a spot show in the Pittsburgh territory, in front of, because that's our crowd. That's who's coming to this show. And I think every single time you run a wrestling event, it's up to you to get the return customer. So when everybody says, oh, these towns are dead, kayfabe's dead, whatever, I really believe the contrary. I believe, anything can be built upon. But, I think this is a good opportunity for us to make new fans, to make these, adults and make them want to come to a WrestleRex and make them say, oh, wow, those guys that we never heard of, they're just as good as the guys on TV. They're from Pittsburgh, though. We got to see them again.
Absolutely, man. I'm geared up for this show. I'm 32, but I'm also, someone I love old wrestling. I grew up on, late 80s wrestling, early 90s wrestling, but I've also gone back and watched it, and I love any sort of decade to watch it. So this is something that I'm really looking forward to seeing how you sprinkle in and pepper out certain things from your and new and all in one,
Well, I think that's something that also has given me a competitive edge, not only in my personal career, but as my career as a promoter as well, because it goes back to, in my opinion, knowledge is power. The more you know,
Yes.
the more cards you have to show. And, I'm one, I think a lot of people have these preconceived notions that modern wrestling needs to follow a certain format. And I think, I'm one of these people that tell people, no, it's not necessarily like that. What works, works. And instead of, trying to conform and do what everybody else does, sometimes you got to lead the charge. And I think, just booking ideas and just the way the shows unfold, there's things that we do, between WrestleRex and between, this show, which is one of my father's promoted shows, that makes it a little different, but keeps it a little special. And I think that's something that as a wrestler, it's built credibility for me because when I wrestle legends or, these older guys, they can sit down and say, man, that kid's 35. He gets it. But it also does the same thing with the fan base because these same fans may go to another independent show that are going to do, XYZ high spot crazy style match with 7 dives. They may not like it. Whereas, I know what their general flavor is and we can present it in a way that they might say, damn, that was some good stuff. Let's go back. So it's helped me be, as far as a wrestler and promoter and booker. But I think this is a new challenge for me. I'm excited because it is a little bit of a different market.
And speaking of the market, I wanted to just ask you in general, what makes Pittsburgh such a unique and to me a great pro wrestling town? There's so much history here. Bruno and Kurt Angle, and I'm not even going to go through everybody, but I mean, there's a lot here. And just to you, from someone that's there and it's been around the world, what makes Pittsburgh so unique in that regard?
The beauty of Pittsburgh would be the fact that it does have a foundation of wrestling fans, and that this stems back to the territories. When you have a strong TV product from the 40s, 50s, or 60s, wherever that TV product thrives makes a wrestling town. So this can be said about, St. Louis, Kansas City, Dallas, certain cities where usually it's where the TV is derived from, is where it's the hottest, because generations, if it was strong in the 60s, it might skip a generation, but then in the 80s, Pittsburgh was such a big town for WWF because the children of those studio wrestling fans were now going to these events. Pittsburgh has that going for it. There's just a legacy of of wrestling for years that make it great. But I think more than anything, Pittsburgh is just a very, very proud fan base in general because of our sports team. A lot of people in Pittsburgh do not like to hear it, but Pittsburgh is not a big city. Pittsburgh is a famous city. And I have that conversation with a lot of my friends. We're a lot like Liverpool in the United Kingdom, whereas we're not the biggest, we're not the baddest, but us because our sports are better than yours. And that's kind of given us a sense of self-worth, pride, and passion that most Pittsburghers carry with them the rest of their lives. I think as far as Pittsburgh wrestling goes, I think this is, that's why to this day it's a major market for WWE. I think it's the one city where, it could kind of self-sustain based on being Pittsburgh wrestling as opposed to being, not to say there's anything, even remotely like this right now, but who's to say what could come up? But, I think we're one of the only cities where there could be WWE, there could be AEW, and Pittsburgh wrestling could be self-sufficient because the fan base would say, yeah, I like WWE, I like AEW, but this is our wrestling. And exactly. I think it's a unique thing to have, kind of the way Philadelphia had it for ECW. I think we could get there for Pittsburgh, but that's probably going to be saved till I'm done. Hang up the in-ring boots and I'm ready to be a full-time promoter.
When do you see that happening? How long do you want to do this? Of course, that's health withstanding. You never know how things go, but sure. How long would you like to do it?
I don't think it's ever really up to the wrestler. I think when you say retirement, that's selfish. I think that's just trying to feel sorry for yourself and get a bit of a reaction out of somebody, or, lie to yourself. Terry Funk's my favorite wrestler ever, and he's had 5 retirements, and none of them were his idea. Everybody else says, hey, why don't we do a retirement show? And you're done. Okay, yeah, how much are you going to pay me? Okay, cool. Never his idea, so I think it's kind of an oxymoron when I hear how many people, on the independents talk about retiring and, look up the definition of retirement. And I think you have to make money in order to retire. So I don't know if a lot of these guys retire from wrestling or they just give up their hobby until they decide not to.
Well said, man. I could honestly could not have really thought of it in that sort of perspective before. And of course, you're the guy, you're the wrestler. I'm just the guy talking about it. So let's talk about this show as a whole. I'm going to talk a little bit about the special guests that we're going to have. So the show's about Bruno. It's Bruno Forever. And I just wanted to bring up how unique this is. Most recently in pro wrestling, a lot of talk about the John Cena heel turn, and one of the biggest heel turns in the history of pro wrestling happened with Larry Zbyszko and Bruno Sammartino. And I just feel like, as far as wrestling goes, there's always been that good guy that's had a friend, and at some point, it's just not going to work for them anymore. So where do you relate that in regards to just turning on guys and just great angles from years past?
I think the Zbyszko angle and the Stan Hansen angle almost set the tone for, professional wrestling drama being turned all the way up. I think the Zbyszko turn was so epically done, and it was just kind of like long-term booking that everybody claims to talk about on the internet that, is very well done, and it made the difference. Both matches, not only Zbyszko, but Stan Hansen was showdown at Shea. These are 2 of the biggest angles ever, but it all gets traced back to the importance of Bruno. There wasn't a number 2. There wasn't even a close number 2. You could try with Pedro Morales or, Ivan Putski, but Bruno was in a level of his own. And, I think that's what made, I think, the traditional blueprint of what we know and what most people think they know about professional wrestling now could all be stemmed back to Bruno's, main run in the 60s and 70s in WWF. That was the blueprint of how to book pro wrestling. The Northeast became the one that worked. And, a lot of people always argue what makes the territory systems, what made them different and who had the best territory. The only reason that the WWF won that war was because it was the most palatable to everybody. You got to look at the culture surrounding each city and the people that go there. New York was fast and furious in the 60s and 70s. They're not going to sit down and watch 3 hours of Jack Briscoe and Tori Funk. I love it. But that crowd base, these people that are on Wall Street from 9 a.m. till 7 p.m. and, hitting the bar, they're a faster paced society. So you have to come and build your crowd to what they enjoy. Bruno was perfect for that. He was fast and furious. He was the Italian immigrant that stood for hard work and, the best comeback in wrestling, just chaos. And he would light the garden up. And, that's what WWE to this day, you could probably draw more parallels between John Cena and Bruno Sammartino than anybody, and people don't want to agree to that, because Cena still came from an era where it had to be a little bit more, contrived than what it was, but just, be the good guy, stand up for what's right, and give the bad guys what they have coming to them.
And it's a testament to Bruno in general, selling out MSG for how many different times and years, and the success of WWE and F in that building. And they just ran there this past week on Raw. So if it never happened to such success and acclaim back then, we might never even have had a show like the other night. So it's really wild to see.
Exactly. And that all ties into, the fact that Bruno's personal story is so, epic about escaping the war with his family and settling in Pittsburgh. I really think that Pittsburgh should care a little bit more than it does about Bruno. That's where this whole idea came from. We would like to somehow get the point where, this becomes an annual event and we can raise money.
I would love that.
If there was somehow, one of my personal goals in life would be to get us a statue of Bruno outside the arena or something. We need it. He's just as influential in different ways than as a Roberto Clemente or a Willie Stargell. So I think he's just a big deal, and the city needs to respect his legacy a little bit more than it does.
I tend to agree, and it's also kind of frustrating where it's like after he is passed, you have to push for that. When it's maybe even at the time he wasn't as loved or celebrated as he should have been when he was around.
And it's really sad too, because again, with the WWE, their catalog has been so important in modern wrestling history, and it's, you understand they're, branding the way they are, but obviously, they have different goals in mind than to immortalize some, local guy from Pittsburgh, when they might not have as much footage of him or might not have as much lore involving him as they did a Hulk Hogan or a Randy Savage or a Rock and Austin. So, him just being the nobody denies that he's one of the biggest stars, but the way things fell into play, he wasn't as widely accessible as everyone else. And I feel like it's kind of a shame because, if he was, it'd be a whole different story.
Right. And he paved the way for Hogan and those guys to have that success in the 80s. And he got the longest WWF title run of all time.
He did have issues with there was years where he wasn't on speaking terms with WWE, which I'm sure didn't help his cause. But who's to say? I think now with social media, the beautiful part of it is you can't really keep a secret tied down. And I think, in enough time, it might be next year, it might be 5 years from now, but eventually the record books will keep up or catch up and start realizing this guy was, a much bigger deal than what our TV tells us he is.
I tend to agree. And someone else who I think is, bigger than the sport almost at times is Stan the Laird Hansen. We talked about him earlier. He's going to be in attendance. You're going to be around him all weekend, which is really badass. Japanese legend, worldwide legend. I love his wars with Vader personally because I'm a big Vader fan. So those really attracted me to his work. But tell me a little bit about what you love about Stan Hansen.
I think, I'm just like you. I was a huge Japanese wrestling tape collector, and I think that almost adds to his lore so much. I think as Americans, and I've been to Japan 5 times, and I have some great friends there. I've enjoyed it. I spent a total of 3 months of my life over there, divided amongst 5 tours. But I think Americans tend to romanticize Japan so much because of technology, cartoons, food, so much we tend to only really know the cool stuff that comes about Japan. So people just,
Right.
wow, it's Japan, it's better. Wow, it's Japan, it's better. Same can be said in the wrestling world. There's some of the best wrestlers on earth that come from Mexico, but it's not as easily accessible and it's not as high quality footage. So a lot of, if you look at online wrestling fans, very few of them watch Mexican wrestling compared to how many of them watch Japanese wrestling. And I think that kind of is what made Stan so incredible. We've all seen his American stuff, but we all saw the quality of what he was doing in Japan for so many years. We know how he's revered. I think it's built kind of an aura about him. Like, okay, we know he's one of the best, but we didn't get to have him as a kid. He wasn't ours. He was theirs. And I think that kind of makes him a little bit more special. The fact is that he doesn't do independent appearances. He's not doing these Comic Cons all the time. This is a one-off because of his respect for the San Martino family. So I think, all the pieces lined up in the right way that I think it's going to be a special night. But again, I mean, we have people coming from all over the country just because they don't know the next time they're going to be able to get a picture with the guy.
Absolutely. And someone else that's going to be there that's taken a lot of photos, written about a lot of things in pro wrestling, Bill Apter will be there. And he's a guy that, even with the internet or pre-internet, when I didn't have the internet, I would always look at the PWI magazines. I'd read through them, even though if they were a month or two behind of what was actually happening, you didn't know that it was behind and you just needed to keep up some way, the rankings, everything. How influential is Bill Apter to where things are today, where everybody, look, you're on a podcast right now, everybody has a voice, everybody has an avenue to do it, but Bill Apter was one of the OG guys to really set that in motion.
Bill is almost a hidden legend, and I think he can take credit a lot more for, modern, the way the podcasting industry is shaped and how everybody, that there's a market for people talking about wrestling the same way as there's a market for people wanting to watch wrestling. Bill's kind of the genesis of it all. Bill is so highly respected, and Bill was actually able to do something that's kind of a lost art now because too many people want the gossip and the dirty that, I think a lot of people are not willing to keep their mouth shut or not willing to play along for the sake of the story. Bill was a guy that knew what was happening before anybody did. And he knew how to make it better. Bill was a guy that, a lot of money has been drawn through the deception of Bill Apter. And I think a lot of people don't give that the credit it deserves. I wish there was, podcasters and people, I wish there was people out there with a forum, let's say Busted Open Radio. I wish they could say, hey, why don't we do this here to do this for WrestleMania? It'd be great. It really would help everybody because, we talk about kayfabe being dead. Kayfabe's only dead because we wrestlers know it's dead and we're not trying to bring it back to life. If there was a way podcasters and wrestlers could all be on the same page, think about how one tweet can blow up in somebody and turn into this drama. We should all be leaning into that and making it part of the business instead of, everybody thinking of the here and today and their own viewers instead of, the suspension of disbelief.
I could not agree with you. I could not agree with you more on that. Where why can't everybody be in on it and help the whole business as a whole move forward and elevate it to a level that we used to enjoy, where you didn't have to worry about things. People, a pro wrestler saying kayfabe is dead. It was never even a thing before. It was more of just a niche thing, and we all know, but we want everybody else to not know. And that
there's
was
really I would still say 95% of the world still has reasonable doubt. And this is coming from someone that, literally lives my daily life, that knows people that, ask me questions about wrestling. The first question out of everybody's mouth is always, did you win? Well, if you're so smart and you didn't, that it's fake, why is that the question you ask? So, we can all be a lot better at doing it, but, until somebody major starts leading the charge and leading by example, I think it's just going to be the way that it is.
I agree. And lastly, this guy named Corey Graves is going to be there. Who did he ever beat, right?
It's pretty exciting. For those who don't know, that's my older brother. Most of the Pittsburgh independent fans have known him for years because that's where he came up. That's where he cut his teeth, not as a commentator, but as a wrestler, as Sterling James Keenan. So he was a big deal in the Pittsburgh Indies for my dad's companies, for all the other local companies. And, he's actually been in Pittsburgh for a few years now. Obviously he just has a newborn baby, and his wife, Carmela, they live in Pittsburgh. So we've been trying to get him locked down for a long time, but WWE is not, very accommodating for a lot of independent. Not that they're not accommodating. It's more or less
Right.
that the schedule does not allow it. He's busy,
Right.
busy. But luckily, because of the circumstances, and he got special approval. WWE gave their blessing for it, this one, and he's actually going to be there Saturday. So meet and greet. And from what I understand, he's going to be interviewing Stan Hansen in the ring.
Wow.
So
That's really cool.
That should be a pretty fun little moment, a piece of history and time. So we'll still see. It's going to be a great event. It's going to be a great event. There's already over 200 tickets sold, which is huge for independent standards. So the goal is hopefully to pack this place out. And, you can bring charitable donations, canned goods, non-perishable items. It's more or less like a fan convention type situation. From 4:00, the doors will be open. We'll be having silent auctions for classic wrestling memorabilia. There'll be vendors. There'll be wrestlers selling their merchandise. There'll be a life-size cardboard cutout of Bruno to get your picture with. They're raffling off a replica belt of the WWF Championship from 1962.
Whoa. Love that.
So there's a lot of cool, fun, interactive stuff. The Q&A with Stan Hansen will be from 6 to 7, and the wrestling event starts at 7. So it's a whole day festivity. Just come hang out. There's plenty of merchandise and refreshments, and it'll be a great night.
Looking forward to it, man. And yes, Sam Adonis, Ray Lynn, Beastman, the Savage Gentleman, Victor Benjamin, and more will be there. Of course, Stan Hansen, Corey Graves, Bill Apter, and who knows who else will be there. I'm very much looking forward to it. So before we head out, just any last thoughts on the independent pro wrestling scene in Pittsburgh? How much you're excited for this event? Just any final words before we head on out of here as we head towards Saturday.
I'm just more focused on Saturday. That's been something I've been putting so much effort into. I do my best to try to, use myself and my positioning in the wrestling business to, kind of bring what I love about wrestling back home. It is a great wrestling city. I think we've been lucky enough to have a lot of opportunity, and we've been able to learn more than your average wrestling family in Pittsburgh. So I would love people to know that Pittsburgh is synonymous for good wrestling. And wherever you see, my face or some of the other wrestlers on this face, I just want to break the stigma that independent wrestling is not on the level, because there are plenty of independent wrestlers that are just as good, if not better, than the guys on TV. But through no fault of their own, they're not signing these contracts. It's just things happen. I think I'm a good example of that myself. But I would love people to know, when you see my face, when you see Beastman's face, when you see Pros of Wrestling or WrestleRex, okay, hey, this is the real deal. So, just trying to bring up that quality and make it a fun, worthy investment every time we have a show is all I'm trying to do.
Awesome, man. So I cannot wait for it. I'm sure you're looking forward to it as well. Can't wait to see Stan Hansen in attendance for the whole thing. This Saturday, Ross Township Recreation Center, Bruno Forever, a very special celebration of Bruno Sammartino's life and career and the Pittsburgh wrestling community as a whole. So, Sam, I really appreciate you hopping in the juice box with me this week, and looking forward to seeing you on Saturday, man.
Sounds good, my brother. I'll see you again this week.
Hell yeah. That was the Juice Box with Juice Springsteen. Make sure to subscribe to the Juice Box wherever you listen to podcasts.